What's going on, everybody? Jesse here. Welcome back to another episode here in our inventory system. In today's episode, we're going to be able to start dropping items from our inventory as well as using the items that are currently in our inventory. So let me go ahead and show you what that looks like here. So if I go up here and pick up the item, we got it to where it's going to remove it from the world. You see we have it in here. If we right click and drag it off into the world, it's just going to spawn it and it's going to throw it right out in front of us. We can come back over here and we can pick it back up. Let's go ahead and pick this one up. And there we go. So we've got the items in here. If we drop 3 items, we come back out here, pick it up, and it knows it was 3 items, and we pick it up. And if we left click it, there we go. We use it. It shows used item. We can use all the items that are in our inventory and they're all gone. So that's it. That's what we're going to go ahead and do in this video. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Today's episode and others just like it are brought to you by the patrons you see on the screen now. If you'd like to support the channel and future development, then consider becoming a patron by visiting my Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can receive various benefits such as early access to my videos as well as personalized support. You may also want to consider joining the community in my Discord server, where you can receive help from me as well as the community. So come on over and be a part of the conversation. All right, so before we get into this, I went ahead and I changed the name of this function. It was called onDrop. This is in our inventory component, what we made in our last video. I went ahead and changed the name of this just to kind of save on a little bit of confusion, because we're about ready to make another function that does some dropping. So with that changed, if you're following along, change that too if you would like. Otherwise, that just helps keep you up to date with what's going on. So let's go ahead and add a new function here. Again, we're inside the inventory component, and I'm going to name this drop item. We need an input on it, and the input item, or the input, will be for an item, and that is of F inventory item. So with this, what we need to do is let's just go ahead and grab our remove item. Whenever we drop something, we want to just go ahead and remove it from our inventory or from the inventory, wherever this is being dropped from. Because remember, this will end up being called on a storage unit, things like that. So we want to remove the item first. And then when that's done, what we need to do is now we need to actually drop the item. But before we get into the code of that, let's just jump over into our blueprint interface, the interact HUD. And in here, let's create a new interface function call. And I'm going to name this one drop item. And again, just like we did with the last one, we're going to put an input of item and make it of F inventory item. All right, let's go ahead and make sure you save that, and then jump back into your inventory component here. So now let's just grab the get player character, and we'll worry about the actual code for the drop item in just a minute. But let's pull off of the player character, and now let's just do an interface call of drop item message. All right, so we're going to obviously call this onto our player character, and then the item we want to pass in is get item, which is just going to be this right here, get item, and let's pass this along. And that should be it for this function here. So let's close out the function here and return it. Make sure you compile it. So now let's go ahead and head into our true first person character. All right, so this is where all the magic's going to end up happening here, is where we drop our item. What I want this to do is when we drop an item, I don't want it just to spawn in the world right in front of you, right? Now, what I want to do is I want to be able to just kind of toss it, make it look like it's being tossed out of your hand, like you're grabbing it out of your pocket and you're just throwing it out in front of you. So what we need to do here, let's go ahead and open up the interface call, or interfaces, and we want drop item. This is the new one we just created. So what we need to do is we need to take off the item here, and let's break this. And from this, we need to spawn actor from class. Grab that. And the actor we want to spawn is actually not this item. Remember, we're not spawning this item here. We are spawning the world item. So let's go BP world item. This is the actor that we created that's going to be spawned into the world, and we need to now populate its variables. So select put the item into the item and the quantity into the quantity there. We can go ahead and minimize this now, hide the unconnected pins, And so now we need a transform. So where do we want to spawn it? I'm going to right click and I'm going to split the struct pin here, because really all we care about is the spawn transform. There's a couple different ways that you can do this by using both the location and the rotation, but I'm just going to do it kind of simple, pretty much what we did here with the vision trace. So I'm just going to grab the actor location, get actor location. All right, and then let's get actor rotation. And from the rotation, let's get forward vector. So this way we know which way the actor is facing. And from the forward vector, now this is going to be up to you, whatever you want to do. I'm going to enter multiply here, right click, and let's convert this to a float, double precision float. Now what this number relates to is how far out in front of you want to spawn the actor. So just for me for now, I'm going to go ahead and enter 200. You can make this a variable so you can change it dynamically if you want, or you can just do like I'm doing here and hard code it in. This may end up changing as we move a little bit forward, but for now 200 seems to work okay. So grab the actor location and let's just add it to this one right here. Right, so drag off of this pin now. We just take this and throw this into the spawn transform location. So now what this will do, and you can actually, this will actually spawn from around the center of the actor. You'll see as we do this, this will spawn about the center of the actor. You can create, over here in the viewport, you can create like a little, let's go, just show you here, add a sphere. You can just take like a sphere here, put it on your character, make it invisible so it's hidden in the game and no collisions or anything on it. And you can put it in here and use that as your spawn point, so you can kind of drag it around. You can't use this arrow. The arrow, it won't let you use the arrow. So, but you can add a sphere, something like that, or you can add a bone or a socket to the character and move it to wherever you want, make that your spawn location. And then in the event graph, instead of getting the actor location, you just get the location of the sphere or whatever, right? You just get that there. This is going to be fine for me for now, because like I said, this will actually spawn from about the center, about waist height, which is about perfect for what we need. Okay, so now that we have that all set up, go ahead and drag off of our world item here, and we want to get the display mesh. So get display mesh. All right, and before we do anything with that, let's go ahead and let's get our actor location, which this is the player. This is the actor of the self, which is, we're in the first person character here. So, and then we also need to drag off of the return value here and get this actor location. Okay, and then from the first one here, drag off and get unit direction vector. Essentially, this is just going to find the vector, the forward vector between these two actors. It takes our actor location, and then where we spawn this at, it gets the location of this one and just kind of gets the forward vector of that for us. So now if we drag off the display mesh, go set physics linear velocity right there. Grab that one, and you're going to get a little notice in here in the comment says this should be used cautiously. It may be better to use add force or add impulse. I was going to do an add impulse, but I was getting undesirable results because the way this is going, we're adding an impulse to something that is falling in the world, and it just kind of spins it. It doesn't really shoot it out in front of you. So as long as you're using this sparingly, it's not too big of a deal. I think the reason why it tells you that is because it's kind of an expensive process to do. So just keep that in mind. This isn't something you really want to do and use everywhere. And if there's a, if you start having problems using this, then try to make this to where it's kind of limited in its use, as far as like you can't call this a bunch of times in a row, that you maybe put a delay in there or something before it can actually be called, but it should be okay. And actually, before we plug it in here, let's go ahead and drag off of this, and let's multiply again and again. Right click on this bottom pin, and let's convert this to a float double precision. And this is how much velocity we're going to add to it, right? You can add whatever you want. The more you add here, the further out in front of you it's going to go. And this could change, depending on your items and things like that. So, but for now, I'm just going to enter 300. And again, like I said earlier, you can actually turn this into a variable and make it so you can change it a little bit easier, you know, that way, instead of hard coding it into the node there. But I'm good for now. Take that. Don't worry about the bone name or add to current. We're fine. If you add it to current, it's going to add this velocity to its current velocity, which might not be quite what you want. It'll take this because remember, the item's going to be falling from about our waist. So it's already going to have that downward velocity. We don't want to add to that downward velocity. We just want to kick it out in front of us and let it just kind of arch and fall down. Should pretty much do it here for this particular function for the event drop. So there it is right there. Relatively simple. So now let's go ahead and jump into our primary HUD. And there's a few things that we're going to need to do here. But first and foremost, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add into our panel here, I'm going to add a border. I'm going to take it and I'm going to drop it onto the canvas panel itself. Okay, we don't want it to be in front of any of the inventory windows. So I'm going to move it and drag it up here. And with this border, we're going to do some settings here. But first, I'm going to add a blur. So type blur here in the search panel, take the background blur and drop it onto the border. So that way it's tied to the border. And in the border, I'm going to change a few things here. Let's grab our anchor, and I'm going to hold Control and Shift. You can see in the bottom here, it says hold these to pretty much set everything to where it's ready. So I'm just going to hold Shift and Control and then click on this one. So there we go. It expands it over the entire window. And this is why we moved it up, is it shows up behind the inventory windows there. And I'm going to take the brush color. I'm going to actually set this to black and turn the alpha down to, I don't know, maybe 0.25, and then hit OK. And then we're going to come up here. All these values are set the same. Stretch. Let's go ahead and change the padding here. We want to just enter 0. We don't want any padding around this one. Fill up the entire screen. And then the other important thing here is on the visibility. We don't want this to be visible because remember, this primary HUD is actually spawned as soon as the game starts on the character. So if we have this visible, it's going to be noticeable right away and we're going to have a blurry background no matter what. So set the visibility to collapse and then we'll just change this to be visible when we open up our inventory. And that should do it. It looks like that should do it here. For the design, we want to actually, before we do that, come down here to the black background blur. And the only thing we're going to change here is a blur strength. I'm going to set this to about 5. Set it to whatever you want, but I'm going to set it to 5, and that should be about all we need to do. So let's go ahead and make sure we save all that settings. I do want to change. We do need to set this as a variable actually. So I will do BG underscore border for background border and choose it as is variable. And then go ahead and compile it there. And let's jump over into the graph. Now that we're in the graph, let's jump over into the show player inventory function. And in here, this is where we're going to enable the visibility. We're already setting the visibility of the inventory windows. So let's go ahead and drag out the BG border that we just created and get that and set visibility. And then just plug it into the execution pins here. And then what's going to set the visibility is just what we're doing right here. Just take off of here and same thing coming in. We only want this to be visible at the same time this is being visible. So that's it for that. So what we actually need to do now is actually we need to override on drop in this function now. And that's why we created the background. So now let me jump over to the designer and show you. So now when we drag an item around, you'll see here part of this window will count as that as well. But now that we have this background that's here, it's going to be recognized. If this wasn't here, we wouldn't have anything to call on drop because we're not actually touching anything with the mouse when we drag over it. So now if we drag an item out of our inventory and put it onto this blurred section or any area that doesn't have a slot on it, it will drop it and spawn it into the world. So let's go out here now into the on drop and grab off of the operation. Actually, we need to create a new interface call because remember, we've got an interface for our slot drag that we use, which is the BI inventory widget. So let's jump into the BI inventory widget and let's go ahead and add a new function. And this new function, I'm going to call this get payload item. And then on the output of this, actually, we just need to output an item. So give it the name of item and it will be of F inventory item. So now we're going to return this. So now let's just go ahead and write the function. We'll come back and actually set this up into our slot drag operation in a minute. So off of the operation, let's drag off of this and go get payload item message. Okay, so from here, let's break out this item. So from this item, all we really need from this item is the owning inventory. So we're going to drag off of this now, and we created that function drop item. So let's go ahead and call that now. So now this is being called on whichever inventory. This could be storage, this could be your personal inventory, whatever inventory that this belongs to is what we're going to call this drop item onto. So now I'm just going to go ahead and hide the unconnected pins. That's all we need from that. And so now grab the item that we're passing out from the payload item and pass that into the dropped item. And then after we call the drop item, let's grab off of the owning inventory. And now we just need to update inventory. So drag out the update inventory function that we have here inside of our primary HUD. And then hook up the inventory that we want to update is this one. And then that should be it. So drag off. Now remember, this is the overridden on drop call. So we want to make sure we pass true here. If you don't pass true, then it's going to actually cancel this. It will run the drop canceled function, which we don't want it to do, don't need it to do. So pass the true here. And that should be it for this. Now this completes the function for this. Make sure you compile it and save it. So the last thing we need to do before this will work is let's jump over to our slot drag operation. And from in here, you'll see under interfaces, we now have the get payload item. Let's go ahead and select that. So now let's just grab the payload variable, which is all the way down at the bottom, get the payload. And from here, let's do a cast to the WP BP inventory slot. And I'm going to right click on here, convert it to a pure cast because this should not fail. If this fails, you have other issues. Drag off of here now and let's get the item variable from the slot, and then this is what we're going to pass through. So remember, the payload is the item that we're dragging around, and we want the item that is being from that slot that is being dragged around. This is what we're going to pass through. So go ahead and compile this, and now this should hopefully let us work. So let's go ahead and go check that out. Go ahead and grab an item here out of the world. Select it, press E. So now if we open up our inventory, you can see the background gets a little bit darker and blurs. You can change this however you want to either be blurry, not blurry, darker, lighter, whatever you want. So let's go ahead and grab our item, drag it around and drop it out here. And there we go. It spawns it into the world, removes it from our inventory. If I close the inventory, open it back up, it's not there. And if I go ahead and select this again, you're going to see we get the item back out here. So I'm going to move it here. And obviously we have a problem with it not kicking out. We'll address that in just a second here, but we're dropping the item. And again, you see if I select it, we dropped one item. So we have one item. So let's just go ahead and test, make sure that the quantity part of it's working. So let's pick this up because we're going to pick up more quantity here. So if I take this 3, drag it and put it out here, drops into the world. Again, we got 1 and 1 here. If we try to pick this up, it's going to remember that we dropped 3. And there we go. It throws it in here. The reason why it mixes it around, because remember it filled up the slot. So we got 1 here. If I try to pick this up again, it's going to make this 3 and a 1 there. All right. So let's go ahead and fix the issue of this not falling and kicking out in front of us. All right. So to fix the problem with the item not falling to the world is pretty simple. It's really just comes down to it needs to simulate physics. So if we come over here into the detail panels and type simulate, or start to type simulate into the display mesh. I'm sorry, select the display mesh, come over here, you're going to see simulate physics, but it's grayed out. We can't actually select it. If you hover over, it tells you that for a static mesh component, there at the bottom it says for a static mesh component, simulating requires simple collision to be set up on the static mesh asset. So whatever you have as the static mesh, it has to have collision. That's not really our issue here. The issue here is actually, if we come into the viewport, is we don't have a display mesh. If we clear this out here, you can see that static mesh is none. There's actually no static mesh here. So that's the problem. We don't actually set our static mesh until this point of the begin play. So let's go ahead and fix that here. So let's just slide this off to the side a little bit. And after the despawn, setting the despawn time, let's just drag off of here and actually grab our display mesh first and go set simulate physics. And we're just going to set this to true because this should have a mesh. Now, this will not become true if we don't set a mesh. So if we're passing through something here that actually doesn't have a mesh in it, if you don't set it properly in your default classes, then this won't ever set to true. So that should work now. So if we go ahead and compile it and save it, and go ahead and let's test this out. All right, so let's go ahead and jump up here, grab an item, and open up the inventory, right click it, drag it around, and there we go. It kicks it out into the world. So let's go ahead and pick this up again. And I want to show you here. So if we're over a slot, it's just going to obviously drag it in a slot. We set that functionality up. If you had space in between these slots, then you could actually technically drop it in between, but these slots that we set it up are side by side. But if you come down here where there's no slots, it's still going to just kick it out. And that'll work too when we have our second inventory, when we do the storage here, which will probably be in our next episode, and we drag something out of there, same thing's going to happen. It's going to be the exact same because it's all within the primary HUD. So there we go, that works. So let's go ahead and jump back into the code. Now let's go ahead and set up the use functionality to where when we click on an item in our inventory that we can be able to start actually using it or consuming it, whatever we want to, whatever you want to call it, whatever, depending on what the item is. All right, so first we're in our inventory component. What I want to do first here though is I'm going to come down here into the process item function, and in here running off of the false, this is the indicator that our inventory is full. When our inventory is full, then we don't want to add the item to our inventory. But one of the things I want to do is I want to be able to, when you do it and your inventory is full, I want to be able to pick the item up and just kind of toss it out. So let's go ahead and right click. I'm going to type player character. Let's get the player character. And then off of here, I'm just going to call drop item, get the drop item message, and hook this into the execution. And then grab, let's get item, and this is coming from the item from right here. Okay, so let's just take that item and pass it in here. So now we'll pick the item. When we go to pick the item up, if your inventory is full, it's just going to try to pick it up, and then it's just going to spit it back out in front of you. All right. There is a problem. We're going to talk about this in a few minutes. There is actually a problem here with the passing successful and not successful into a function. I'll discuss that in a little bit. It's not really relevant to this function, so it will be in a little bit though. So I'll show you. Anyways, while we're in here, inventory component, let's go ahead and add a new function, and I'm going to name mine consume item. Right, this just means to use the item in your inventory to consume whichever it is, right? So from here, let's add an input. And again, we're going to call this item. And for me, it's already defaulted to the F inventory item. So make sure that's the type that it is. And break this out. And from here, what we need to do is we actually need to just remove one of the items, right? We're just, when you click the button, this is going to be, remember when we left click an item in there, that's a button. We're going to use it from there. So we just need to remove one of the items. So drag off the quantity, hit minus twice, and let's just decrement the integer. Okay. And this will actually just set this for us. So, right. So we decrement it 1. And from here, let's pull off of this now, and let's just check, is it less than or equal to 0? Let's grab a branch and hook in the return from that. All right, so from here, grab the item location. Or actually, let's grab the item array. Let's get that and type get, and let's get a reference. Make sure you get a reference. Index location. So off of this, let's go ahead and run this off of the false for now. So false, let's go ahead and set member inventory. Hook in the false, and from here we just need to set the quantity. So go ahead and select the pin right there. So if this is not less than or equal to 0, that means we still have a value. We still have some items remaining. So we're just going to, whatever this return value is, we're going to set it back into the array item. All right. So grab our update inventory HUD function, drop that in. Let's grab a return node, and then that's it for the false branch. And the true branch is going to be just as simple. So go ahead and grab remove item function. Let's just drag it and drop it out in here. Hook it into the true. So since this is less than or equal to 0, then we just need to get it out of our inventory. So let's right click and type item all the way down here at the bottom. Let's get the item. Again, this is the value being passed in. So we just want to remove this item from our inventory. I'm just going to grab these two and copy them, move them up here. So now we just update the inventory and then return the end of the function. Pretty simple stuff right there. Hide the unused pins. And that's it for our consume item. So go ahead and make sure you compile it and save it. All right, so now let me explain to you real quick the problem I'm having with this process item, because we're going to set this up now to where when you pick an item up in the world, it's actually going to remove it from the world. Right now we have it set up to where we can click it a bunch for testing purposes, and it just stays in the world. We can continue to pick it up, but I want it to start kind of destroying the things when we pick it up. So this is part of that process when we interact with it. So when it comes through here, I don't know why it's doing this. I've ran debug on it, and I sat here for an hour or two trying to figure it out and jumping through all the code and trying to figure it out. But for some reason, when you pick up an item and it comes back up here through the true branch, comes back through and hits through, the second time it comes through, it doesn't matter if this is true or not. It always returns false. I don't know why. I've ran the code and I've looked at it, all the numbers, everything value comes out. Even it still shows this as being checked, but when you hover over it, checking the code, it says it's passing false. I have no idea why, but it does. So it's not that important. It would be better if it worked like we want to. I'm sure if I probably was doing this in C++, this would pass true. So it's got to be something with blueprints that is causing this to return false. So when this happens, the reason when this comes back through in loops, it's because we're picking up an item that has we're picking up something that has a greater quantity than the max stack size. So it has to come through and reprocess it the second time. So that actually happens if, like with our bread, when we pick it up in the world right now, its max stack size is 3, but the one we have in the world is actually a quantity of 4. So we pick up the 3 and the 1. So it comes up here, picks up the 3, has 1 left over, comes back through and spits it out, and for whatever reasons return false. But it's not just then either. It does it if we pick up a stack of that is the exact max stack, it's still coming through. I think it still reprocesses here because this is greater than 0, but it's actually, even though we're picking up say 3 and the max stack size is 3, then it still comes up here because it's not greater than 0. So it's processing back through, and it's doing it. So it's not that big of a deal, but know that for whatever reason, I'm going to leave it the same. We could remove this successful return call on here, but I'm not going to worry about it. So let's jump over now into the BP world item, go to the interact function. And from here, this is where we're passing it back through. So when we process it, we're calling this, is it true or false? So whatever, like I said, it's coming through false. You can try it if you want. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I did something wrong in my code, but I don't know. Like I said, I spent some time with it. So I'm just going to delete this branch here. So now all I'm going to do is no matter what, when we process an item, I want it to go ahead and just destroy the actor, right? So this is being called on the world item. So, and I'm going to pass true here because we're still using this call out here. So now when we pick up an item in the world, it's going to go ahead and remove it. So let's go check that out real quick. All right, so now if we just walk up here and hit E on that, there we go. We picked it up. We got the item in the world. Now we can spawn it back out. Come over here, Same thing with this one. And this is what I was talking about. So we've got 3 here. We dropped this out. If we came back out here and picked it back up, it would pass false, and it actually it wouldn't end up deleting that item the way we had it set up. So again, press tab. There we go. All right, so yep, that works. So let's jump back in. We got just a little bit more to do so we can actually use and consume the item. All right, so let's start off here. We're in the BP base item. Now remember, this is just the great grandparent of every other item that we're going to have. So pretty much every item is going to end up needing a use functionality. So I'm just going to create a new function and call it use item. Select that, and this doesn't really need to be anything, right? We really don't want to do any functionality in here on the grandparent. We just want to create the function so that all of the children of this blueprint has this function in here. For me, for right now, just so I can do some testing, I'm just going to put in a print string, and I'm just going to have it say used item, so that way we get some sort of feedback when we use the item to know that this is being called. But once we know this is testing, we want to delete this and then just hook the execution pin up from straight through. Okay, so that way we can run every item that we have can implement its own way that it uses the item, which we'll get into later down the road. So let's go ahead and make sure that you compile it and save it, and then now let's go ahead and jump into the inventory slot widget. All right, so from here, go ahead and just select the use button and then come down here to on clicked. You could do on pressed, on released, whatever you want, but I'm going to do click, so that way you have to do the full press and release of the mouse button in order for it to work. So I'm going to do use item, or excuse me, I'm going to do the use button. And from here, let's go ahead and grab the item. Let's get that and break it. Grab the item class here, and here is the construct. So if you go back and you remember the tutorial I did about using objects as data classes, this is kind of what I had talked about, was being able to construct and use functions. Now, technically you could take this and save this object into an array or into another variable or something like that and use it, but that kind of defeats the purpose of this the way we have this set up, right? We're doing this so we don't have to keep these items. Now, this is technically a cast. We're technically casting to this. It's just a lighter version of a cast. It's not as heavy as a normal cast is, but it still technically is. So you want to keep this, you know, within reason when you're using it, but you don't really want to store this, although you can store anything you construct and come back and use it later. But these items are continuously being destroyed and regrabbed and things like that. So we don't necessarily want to store it. It's just more things for us to track. So from here, let's drag off of this now, and let's grab the use item function that we just created. Hook that in right there. And now if we take off the owning inventory of the item, let's do a consume item. So now we're just going to consume the item, and what we're going to consume is just drag out the item variable again, plug that in, and there we go. That should work now. So let's go ahead and compile it and save it. Let's go check it out and make sure that it works. All right, so let's go over here, and I'm just going to pick up both these items and open up our inventory here. So now if I click on this, there we go, use item. It removed one of the items here just to make sure that all the values took place. Reopen it up, and there we go. We've still got 2 items left there. I could take this, drag that out, use this, drag that out, and there we go. Pick it up, use it. There we go, all gone. So everything seems to work pretty good. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please go down and hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe while you're down there. Maybe hit the notification bell, get notified every time we make a new video. And until the next video, peace.